You finally hit a $50,000 salary. So why does your bank account still feel broke? A $50,000 salary carries a powerful emotional weight because it represents a milestone that society has conditioned people to equate with stability and success. From the moment that number appears on an offer letter, it triggers a sense of arrival. It feels like crossing an invisible line between struggling and making it. The problem is that this feeling is based on perception, not reality. The number itself is large enough to sound secure, yet small enough to collapse under the actual cost of modern life. What looks like financial progress is often nothing more than a mirage created by gross income figures that hide what really matters. Purchasing power. The illusion begins the moment the paycheck hits. Before that money ever reaches your bank account, it is reduced by taxes, mandatory contributions, and benefit deductions, federal taxes, state taxes, Social Security, and Medicare quietly carve away a significant portion, shrinking the headline salary into something far less impressive. What remains is not the $50,000 lifestyle people imagine, but a much tighter monthly reality. When that reduced amount is broken down into rent, utilities, transportation, insurance, and food, the margin disappears almost immediately. The salary still looks good on paper, but paper does not pay bills. This disconnect creates a dangerous psychological gap. People anchor their expectations to the gross number, not the take-home amount. Their spending decisions are influenced by what they think they should be able to afford, not by what their bank balance can actually support. This gap fuels frustration because the math feels wrong. You are doing what you were told would work. You earn more, advance professionally, and yet the relief never arrives. Instead of feeling secure, you feel confused and stressed, wondering why your finances did not improve in the way everyone promised they would. Housing exposes this illusion faster than anything else. Rent alone can consume a massive portion of take-home pay, especially in areas where jobs paying $50,000 actually exist. What remains after housing is not abundance, but scarcity. Transportation costs, whether through car payments, insurance, fuel, or maintenance, further tighten the squeeze. Health insurance premiums and basic utilities finish the job. By the time essentials are covered, there is little left for food, emergencies, or savings. The salary that sounded like freedom becomes a carefully balanced equation where one unexpected expense can destabilize everything. The cruel part is how invisible this struggle is. From the outside, a $50,000 earner appears comfortable. Friends, family, and even coworkers assume financial stability. Complaints about money are often dismissed because the number sounds high enough to silence concern. This creates shame. People feel like they are failing at something everyone else seems to manage effortlessly. The truth is that many are in the same position, quietly stretched thin, maintaining the appearance of success while living paycheck to paycheck. This illusion also distorts behavior. Because the salary signals middle class, people feel pressure to live accordingly. They make purchases not out of excess, but out of expectation. Small upgrades, conveniences, and lifestyle expenses creep in, not because there is extra money, but because it feels like there should be. The salary invites spending habits that the underlying math cannot sustain. The result is not luxury, but fragility. Over time, this illusion reshapes how people see themselves. Financial stress feels personal rather than structural. Instead of questioning whether the income matches reality, people question their discipline, intelligence, or self-control. They try harder to optimize, cut corners, and budget more aggressively, believing the problem is behavior rather than arithmetic. But no amount of discipline can turn an insufficient margin into abundance. The $50,000 salary is not a failure, but it is not the security it claims to be. It exists in a strange space where it looks like progress while functioning like survival. The illusion lies in the promise that crossing a numerical threshold guarantees stability. When that promise breaks, it leaves people working harder, feeling stuck, and questioning why success feels indistinguishable from struggle. Earning $50,000 places a person in a uniquely exhausting financial position that feels neither poor nor secure. but something far more destabilizing. It is the space where the system offers no protection while demanding full responsibility. This income level creates a form of financial limbo where survival is possible, yet progress remains out of reach. The pressure does not come from total lack, but from constant exposure to risk without any meaningful buffer to absorb it. At this level, the most damaging factor is exclusion. Assistance programs, subsidies, and relief options are typically designed for those earning less. Crossing the $50,000 threshold often disqualifies people from help they genuinely still need. At the same time, the income is far too low to compensate for that loss. This creates a silent trap where individuals are expected to function independently in a cost structure designed for far higher earnings. There is no margin for error, yet no safety net to catch a fall. This financial purgatory magnifies the impact of everyday expenses. A single unexpected cost can destabilize an entire month or more. Car repairs, medical bills, rent increases, or even necessary travel quickly become crises. These are not luxuries or poor decisions. They are normal parts of adult life that become disproportionately destructive when income barely exceeds expenses. The constant threat of disruption creates ongoing stress, as people know that one small misstep could undo months of careful management. What makes this position especially cruel is how invisible it is. Society tends to categorize people as either struggling or successful, leaving no room for those caught in between. A $50,000 salary sounds like stability, though financial stress is often dismissed or misunderstood. People are told to budget better or spend less, even when their expenses are already reduced to the essentials. This lack of recognition compounds the stress, making people feel isolated in their struggle. This income level also reshapes decision-making in subtle ways. Long-term planning becomes difficult because the future feels fragile. Saving money competes directly with immediate survival. Emergency funds remain theoretical when every dollar is already assigned. Retirement planning feels abstract when present-day costs consume all available resources. People are forced to prioritize short-term stability over long-term security, even when they know the consequences of doing so. The middle-class squeeze also alters risk tolerance. People at this income level cannot afford to take risks that might improve their situation. Career changes, relocation, entrepreneurship, or additional education all require financial buffers they do not have. At the same time, staying in place often means stagnation. This creates a sense of being trapped, where both movement and stillness carry consequences. The safest choice becomes maintaining the status quo, even when it offers no path forward. Social expectations further intensify this squeeze. A $50,000 income carries assumptions about lifestyle, independence, and competence. People feel pressure to appear financially stable even when they are not. They avoid discussing money struggles to maintain credibility and dignity. This performance of stability drains emotional energy and reinforces the illusion that everyone else is managing just fine. In reality, many are silently navigating the same constraints. Over time, this position erodes confidence. People begin to doubt their ability to ever break free, not because they lack ambition or skill, but because the math never seems to work. Effort does not translate into security, and patience does not lead to relief. The system offers no clear reward for perseverance, only the promise of continued strain. Being caught in this middle space changes how people define success. It is no longer about growth or comfort, but about endurance. Stability becomes a moving target, always just out of reach. The frustration does not come from wanting more than necessary, but from wanting the basic reassurance that one unexpected event will not unravel everything. In this financial purgatory, survival is possible, but peace of mind remains elusive. At a $50,000 income level, time becomes the most expensive and least visible cost. The financial pressure created by this salary does not only drain money, it reshapes daily life in ways that quietly consume energy, attention, and emotional bandwidth. The struggle is not always dramatic or obvious, but it is constant, and it turns ordinary routines into exhausting calculations. Every hour begins to feel like it must justify itself, because time and money are permanently entangled. Work itself expands beyond the job description. The primary job takes up most waking hours. Yet it rarely provides enough financial relief to justify the energy it demands. Commutes, unpaid overtime, mental stress, and recovery time all subtract from personal life. Even outside working hours, the job lingers in the background as worry about performance, job security, and income stability. The salary does not buy peace of mind. Instead, it rents your time while keeping you anxious about losing it. This income level forces people to trade time for money in inefficient ways. Side work, overtime, or informal hustles become necessary, not for advancement, but for survival. Even when additional income is small, it comes at the cost of rest, relationships, and personal development. Free time becomes a luxury that feels irresponsible to enjoy. Rest is often accompanied by guilt, because every hour not earning feels like a missed opportunity to stabilize finances. Time scarcity also affects basic life management. Tasks that could be solved with money must instead be solved with time. People spend hours comparison shopping, fixing things themselves, waiting in lines, navigating customer service, and juggling logistics. These are rational responses to limited funds, but they quietly erode quality of life. What wealthier individuals outsource, those earning $50,000 must personally absorb. The result is a life filled with friction, where nothing feels simple or efficient. The mental load created by this time pressure is heavy. Constant calculation becomes second nature. Decisions that should be small require thought and restraint. Planning a meal, scheduling a doctor's visit, or committing to a social event all involve weighing costs, time, and consequences. This ongoing vigilance is exhausting, and it leaves little room for creativity or spontaneity. Life begins to feel managed rather than lived. Relationships are affected in subtle but powerful ways. Time spent working or recovering from work reduces availability for family and friends. Financial stress seeps into conversations, even when unspoken. Social activities are declined not because of lack of interest, but because of cost or exhaustion. Over time, connections weaken, and isolation grows. The salary that was supposed to support independence instead limits participation in community and shared experiences. This time pressure also interferes with long-term growth. Learning new skills, pursuing education, or building something meaningful requires sustained focus and available hours. At this income level, those resources are scarce. Even when opportunities exist, they compete with immediate financial needs. The future is constantly postponed in favor of managing the present. Progress becomes slow and fragile, easily disrupted by any new demand on time or energy. The most damaging effect is how this dynamic reshapes identity. People begin to see themselves as perpetually busy, yet never ahead. Productivity becomes a measure of worth, even when it leads nowhere. Burnout is normalized, rest is delayed, and fulfillment is treated as optional. The constant exchange of time for barely enough money creates a sense of being trapped in motion without movement. This is not simply about working hard. It is about a system where effort is fully consumed by maintenance. Time is spent sustaining a life rather than building one. At $50,000, the cost of living quietly steals hours, days, and years, leaving people exhausted and wondering why they are always tired despite doing everything they were told would be enough. At a $50,000 income level, financial stress does not arrive as a single crisis, but as a constant background noise that shapes emotions, behavior, and self-perception. It is subtle enough to be dismissed, yet persistent enough to wear people down over time. This form of pressure is especially damaging because it is chronic rather than acute. There is rarely a moment of complete collapse, but there is also almost never a moment of true relief. One of the most powerful effects of this stress is how it rewires emotional responses. Money becomes a source of tension even when nothing is actively wrong. Opening a banking app triggers anxiety instead of information. Bills are paid on time, but with apprehension rather than confidence. Each financial decision carries emotional weight because the margin for error is so thin. This ongoing alertness keeps the nervous system engaged, making it difficult to relax fully, even during moments that should feel safe. Over time, This stress reshapes how people relate to themselves. Confidence erodes quietly. People begin to question their competence, not because they are failing, but because they are not thriving. Effort feels disconnected from outcome, which creates a sense of helplessness. When hard work does not lead to stability, self-doubt takes root. The mind searches for personal flaws to explain a structural problem, turning financial pressure into an identity issue. This psychological strain often spills into health. Sleep becomes lighter and more fragmented as the mind replays calculations and worries. Fatigue accumulates, reducing focus and patience. Small setbacks feel larger because emotional reserves are already depleted. Stress hormones remain elevated, making it harder to recover from even minor challenges. The body carries the burden of financial uncertainty long before any visible crisis occurs. Decision-making also changes under this pressure. When resources are limited, the brain shifts into a defensive mode. Choices become reactive rather than reflective. People prioritize avoiding loss over pursuing gain. This mindset is logical, but it narrows perspective. Opportunities are viewed through the lens of risk rather than possibility. Over time, this reinforces stagnation, as the safest option is often to do nothing at all. Social dynamics are affected as well. Financial stress creates emotional distance. Even in close relationships, people avoid conversations about money to prevent discomfort or judgment. They hesitate to ask for help, fearing they should be able to manage on their own. This silence deepens isolation, making the struggle feel uniquely personal when it is actually widespread. Emotional support becomes harder to access precisely when it is most needed. The pressure of appearing stable adds another layer of strain. A $50,000 income carries expectations of independence and competence. Admitting stress feels like admitting failure. People perform normalcy, maintaining routines and appearances while carrying private worry. This performance is exhausting because it requires suppressing genuine emotions. Over time, the gap between outer stability and inner stress grows wider. Perhaps the most harmful effect is how this environment changes what people believe is possible. When every month feels like a balancing act, hope becomes cautious. Dreams are postponed, not abandoned, but placed perpetually on hold. The future is imagined in smaller terms, shaped by what feels survivable rather than fulfilling. This quiet shrinking of ambition happens slowly, often without conscious awareness. Living at this income level is not defined by dramatic hardship, but by sustained pressure. The stress is not loud, but it is relentless. It settles into daily life, influencing thoughts, emotions, and behavior in ways that are difficult to see from the outside. Over time, it becomes clear that the cost of $50,000 is not just financial. It is psychological, emotional, and deeply human. At a $50,000 income level, the future often feels close enough to worry about but too far away to secure. This creates a quiet tension between responsibility and realism, where people understand what long-term stability requires yet lack the capacity to pursue it meaningfully. The result is not ignorance or carelessness, but a constant postponement of the future in order to survive the present. Planning becomes an exercise in compromise. Saving for emergencies, retirement, or major life goals competes directly with immediate needs. Even small contributions feel heavy because they reduce the flexibility needed to manage monthly expenses. The idea of building wealth exists more as a concept than a practice. The math rarely allows for consistent progress, turning long-term planning into a fragile aspiration rather than a reliable habit. This gap between knowledge and action generates frustration. People are often financially aware. They understand the importance of saving, investing, and preparing for uncertainty. What they lack is not discipline, but margin. Without surplus income, every responsible choice carries an immediate cost. Choosing the future means sacrificing present stability, which is a trade many cannot afford to make. Over time, this creates a sense of being stuck between what should be done and what can be done. The inability to build buffers also amplifies fear of change. Life transitions that are meant to represent growth, such as career shifts, family planning, relocation, or education, become sources of anxiety. Each change carries financial risk, and risk feels dangerous without reserves. As a result, people delay decisions, waiting for a moment of stability that never fully arrives. Life feels paused, even as time continues to move forward. This stagnation reshapes how success is measured. Progress is no longer defined by advancement, but by avoidance of disaster. Stability becomes about maintaining equilibrium rather than expanding opportunity. Years can pass without noticeable improvement, not because of inaction, but because effort is consumed by maintenance. The future remains theoretically important but practically unreachable. The emotional cost of this dynamic is significant. Watching time pass without tangible progress creates grief that is difficult to name. People mourn the version of the future they imagined when they believed effort alone would be enough. This grief is often internalized, masked by responsibility and resilience. Outwardly, life appears functional. Internally, there is a quiet sense of loss. This income level also alters generational thinking. People become aware that they are not building assets or security that can be passed forward. The idea of upward mobility weakens when there is nothing extra to transform into something lasting. The future begins to feel more like a continuation of struggle than a promise of improvement. This realization is heavy, especially for those who were raised to believe that hard work guarantees progress. Despite this, hope does not disappear entirely. It becomes cautious, restrained, and conditional. People continue to plan in small ways, adjusting expectations to match reality. The future is approached with careful optimism rather than confidence. Dreams are downsized to reduce disappointment, not because they lack value, but because the cost of hoping too big feels emotionally risky. Living on $50,000 is not about a lack of ambition or foresight. It is about operating within a structure that absorbs effort without translating it into security. The future remains present in thought but distant in reach. This ongoing tension shapes decisions, emotions, and identity, leaving people responsible for tomorrow while barely equipped to protect it today. If this hit a little too close to home, check out my other videos where we break down money, reality, and how to stop running in place. Subscribe, and I'll see you there.